In this year of 1753, most of North America is still wilderness. A large part of the continent is claimed by the King of France, and in certain parts of this vast area, a few French trading posts have been built. The French are on friendly terms with several of the Indian tribes of the region, and that friendship has helped to make fur trading a profitable enterprise. But a successful fur trade by itself is not enough to establish firm control over the territory claimed by France in North America. The success of New France requires a growing population in farming communities, fishing villages, and also in towns and cities. By 1753, there are a few settlements on the northern shores of the St. Lawrence River in the area called Canada. But the population of New France is still very small. The common people of France have little to gain by coming to America, since only members of the noble classes are allowed to hold land and take part in government. And New France faces other problems. Although several Indian tribes are friendly, others have become enemies of the French. These enemies include the 6 tribes, or 6 nations, that form the powerful Iroquois Confederacy. And their hatred for the French dates back to 1608, when French explorers joined the Algonquin Indians in attacking and defeating the Iroquois. And New France also faces the challenge of other European nations who claim certain areas of North America as part of their own worldwide empires. Most important are the English colonies along the Atlantic coast, where the population has been increasing rapidly. From England and other parts of Europe, people have been drawn to these colonies by a promise of religious freedom, or the opportunity to own land, or the privilege of self-government. But rapid growth has also created problems for the English colonies. Many Indians whose ancestors had welcomed the first English settlers have now become enemies of the English, as more and more of the Indian hunting grounds have been taken over by the expanding colonies. Many of these Indians have joined with the French in attacking English settlements. Between 1689 and 1748, there have been 3 wars between England and France. Wars that began in Europe and spread to North America. As a result of one of these wars, England has gained control of a French province in North America, renaming it Nova Scotia. But this region is only a small part of the vast area claimed by France. And now, in 1753, the stage is being set for a new conflict between the 2 nations. The territory claimed by France includes the fertile valley of the Ohio River. The English consider this region to be a part of their Virginia colony, and they're planning to build settlements here. And the French, to defend their claim, have built a series of forts at strategic locations above the Ohio. October 31st, 1753, in Williamsburg, capital of the Virginia colony, Governor Robert Dinwiddie has decided to send a message ordering the French to move out of the Ohio Valley. The journey from Virginia to the Ohio Valley is a difficult and dangerous one through an uncharted, mountainous wilderness. An earlier messenger sent by Governor Dinwiddie has never returned. This time, the messenger is George Washington, 21 years old and newly commissioned as a major in the Virginia militia. Traveling for 5 weeks in late autumn and early winter, Washington and his 5 companions arrive at the French Fort Le Boeuf in mid-December. 3 days after delivering his message, Washington receives a courteous but firm response. The French commander intends to carry out the orders of his government to take control of the Ohio Valley. April 1754. At the site known as the Forks of the Ohio, where the Allegheny River and the Monongahela join to form the wide Ohio River, a few soldiers from Virginia have begun to build a fort. But the Virginians are driven off by French troops who build their own fort and name it Fort Duquesne. Meanwhile, 2 companies of Virginia militiamen, led by George Washington, are en route to the forks of the Ohio. After attacking and defeating a small advance party sent from Fort Duquesne to intercept them, the Virginians withdraw to their own hastily built fort, which they have named Fort Necessity. In attacking the French advance guard, Washington and his men have fired the first shots of the French and Indian War. And now, with his army of fewer than 400 men, Washington prepares for the French attack that is sure to come. On July 3rd, 1754, Fort Necessity is attacked by 500 French troops and 400 Indians. Hopelessly outnumbered, Washington eventually surrenders and withdraws his troops. The French are now in control of the Ohio Valley. News of Washington's defeat is a cause of great concern, not only here in Virginia, but in the other colonies and in England as well. To prepare for the defense of the colonies, the English government issues a call for a conference to be held in the summer of 1754 in Albany, New York. An invitation to the Albany Congress is sent to the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. There's great concern that the Iroquois may decide not to help the English colonies, either remaining neutral or siding with the French. But the Iroquois agree to attend the Albany Congress, largely because of their respect and affection for General William Johnson, a colonial leader who has lived among the Iroquois and married an Iroquois woman. The Albany Congress, attended by delegates from 7 colonies, also considers a plan proposed by Benjamin Franklin. To provide better defense against the French, Franklin hopes to unite the colonies in a confederation, much like the confederacy of the 6 Iroquois nations. The plan is approved by the Congress, but later the colonial legislatures will reject it. Each colony will continue to provide for its own defense, with some support from the British government. April 1755. Major General Edward Braddock has arrived from England with an army of 1,000 British troops. Another 1,500 men from the Virginia militia have joined Braddock's army for a march into the wilderness to attack Fort Duquesne. George Washington has agreed to serve as a special assistant and aide-de-camp to General Braddock. But Braddock's battle plan is in sharp disagreement with the advice of his young assistant. Washington has fought 2 battles in the wilderness against the French and Indians, and he warns Braddock that the enemy will be firing from behind the cover of trees and rocks. The British must adapt themselves to a new style of warfare. But Braddock will not change his plan. He will use the same battle tactics that have proved successful in Europe. And so, for 3 months, Braddock's army advances slowly from Virginia toward Fort Duquesne. Then, suddenly, on July 9th, 1755, the British are caught on open ground, nearly surrounded by enemies they cannot see. In their bright red coats, they are easy targets. Most of the Virginia troops are killed or wounded, and the few survivors are soon forced to retreat. In his report of the battle, Washington writes, "The officers behaved with incomparable bravery, for which they greatly suffered. The general was wounded in the shoulder and into the breast, of which he died 3 days after." With Braddock's defeat and the loss of so many colonial soldiers, it has become nearly impossible for the British to protect their frontier settlements. A long series of Indian raids brings death and destruction to the frontier. It is part of a campaign to drive the British out of North America. In 1756, General Louis de Montcalm arrives in America to take charge of the French forces. France and Britain are now formally at war in Europe and around the world. The French already control several forts, and Montcalm captures others from the British. In America, and also in India, the British are suffering major losses. London, England in 1757. The military crisis helps to bring about a change in the British government. A new Secretary of State, William Pitt, takes control of the war effort. Pitt will depend on Britain's allies to carry on the war in Europe, while Britain launches a new offensive in America. Colonial troops, supplemented by a few British regulars, are supplied with arms and ammunition and commanded by British generals. In 1758, under Jeffrey Amherst and James Wolfe, the tide begins to turn as Fort Louisburg is recaptured from the French. This victory gives Britain control of the entrance to the St. Lawrence River, which has been the French gateway to America. Another strategic location is Fort Niagara, a French stronghold vital to control of the Great Lakes. In 1759, Fort Niagara is attacked by British and colonial troops. After a 3-week siege, the French are forced to surrender. Britain has now cut the supply line to the French forts in the west. The British drive captures other forts as well, including Fort Duquesne, and the time has come to launch an attack on Quebec, the capital of New France. Quebec is situated on steep cliffs rising above the St. Lawrence River, and it is heavily fortified. The French defenders under General Montcalm outnumber the British attack force by almost 2 to 1. If the British are to take the city, they must find a way past the French defenses to reach the plains of Abraham on the west. In September 1759, after a 3-month siege of Quebec, the British general, James Wolfe, attempts a daring maneuver. Under cover of night, his troops are carried upriver in small boats. Slipping past the French defenses, the invaders scale the cliffs and reach the plains of Abraham. On the morning of September 13th, a line of British troops waits until the French have advanced within 50 yards, and then a concentrated volley of gunfire. The French defenses are shattered as British troops charge with bayonets. The British have won the decisive battle of the French and Indian War. Paris, France, 1763. The signing of the Treaty of Paris brings an end to the 7 Years' War in Europe and the French and Indian War in America. Britain has triumphed over France in Europe and in India, as well as in America. Most of the French territory in the New World has been surrendered to the British. In the British colonies, soldiers like Colonel George Washington have gained valuable military experience, and they have a new sense of confidence in their ability. American soldiers have proved themselves to be the equals of their British counterparts. Now that the French threat has been removed, the colonists have no need to look to England for protection. A new American spirit of liberty and independence has begun to develop, partly as a result of the American experience during the French and Indian War.